You will tonight pass over a video of a city which you have never seen, showing a decade about which you were not alive to witness, and for a moment your chest will sadden with a sense of homesickness that you can't name. The streetlights will appear too warm, the music will sound too familiar, and you will feel the phantom weight of a memory which isn't yours. Actually, the true answer is even more strange than just imagination. Your brain is not simply daydreaming. It is taking over the memory system it possesses in order to grieve a golden age that never actually existed. Psychologists call this anemoia. The word was invented by John Koenig in his Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, but the phenomenon itself had already been the subject of intensive scientific study for many decades. It had simply been classified within the wider category of nostalgia. Nevertheless, anemoia is not nostalgia in the ordinary sense. You do not long for your own past, you long for someone else's. In order to see why this seems so realistic, you need to understand the effect that nostalgia has on the brain. For much of the 20th century, psychologists regarded nostalgia as a disease. In 1688, a Swiss doctor called Johannes Hofer invented the term to refer to the real physical suffering experienced by Swiss mercenaries who were far from home. It was thought that it caused fever, insomnia, and even death. This belief continued for many centuries. Nostalgia was considered to be homesickness, and homesickness was seen as a medical condition. It was not until the 2000s that psychologist Constantine Sedikides and his colleagues, among them Tim Wildschut, started systematically restoring the emotion. What they found sounded almost impossible. Nostalgia is not a weakness, it is a psychological resource. A landmark study carried out in 2006 by Wildschut, Sedikides, Arndt, and Routledge showed that nostalgia is caused specifically by deficiencies in a sense of belonging. If you are feeling lonely, disconnected, or unsure about your position in the world, your brain goes back in time and calls up idealized memories of social connection and meaning. The outcome is not an increase in sadness but rather a form of repair. Nostalgia makes you feel that you have social support, increases the belief that life is meaningful, and helps you cope with feelings of existential threat. This has been shown by Sedikides and Wildschut in over 20 experiments. The people who were experiencing nostalgia felt more loved, more protected, and more purposeful than the control group. That is to say, your brain makes use of nostalgia as a form of emotional medicine. This is where the machinery poses a danger. Your brain is indifferent as to whether the memory it is using is actual. In 1996, Elizabeth Loftus, along with Marianne Gary, Charles Manning and Stephen Sherman, carried out a study which should have frightened anyone who has faith in their own memories. In this study they asked the participants to imagine some simple childhood events which had never actually taken place, for example being saved by a lifeguard or breaking a window with one's hand. When people had only imagined the events a small number of times, their confidence in the idea that the events had really taken place increased considerably, and their confidence scores rose. This phenomenon is known as imagination inflation. Vividly picturing something in the mind ends up putting it into memory with a level of detail that makes it seem genuine. You tend to confuse intensity with truth. Things only get worse. In 2007, Daniel Schacter, who was a cognitive neuroscientist at Harvard, and Donna Rose Addis put forward the constructive episodic simulation hypothesis. Their research, which was based on brain imaging studies, showed that memory is not like a video recorder, it is more like a construction site. Your hippocampus and the default mode network don't just go over past events, instead, they take fragments of your previous experiences and flexibly recombine them to simulate possible futures. This kind of process is advantageous since it enables you to plan, get ready, and make predictions. Yet the same system which is used in creating the future can be put to use in constructing the past. The thing that your brain does when you are looking at a carefully selected clip of Tokyo from the 1980s at midnight or at a slow-motion sequence of cafes in Paris from the 1920s is exactly what it has evolved to do. it picks out sensory fragments, puts them back together again, and produces a simulation of an experience. Since this simulation seems vivid and emotionally meaningful, the brain treats it in the same way as it does with real memories of your own life. The times indicated are of no importance since your limbic system doesn't verify birth certificates. Neuroscience has shown that this is not a metaphor. In an fMRI study carried out in 2015, Oba and his colleagues presented the participants with images that evoked their childhood alongside some neutral control images. The nostalgic images did not just activate the hippocampus, which is the brain's memory center, they also caused the substantia nigra, the ventral tegmental area, and the striatum to become active. These areas are the main parts of the brain's reward system. You actually get rewarded by the brain when you feel nostalgic. In a 2013 PET study carried out by Matsunaga and his colleagues, this was taken a step further. When the participants were exposed to personalized nostalgic smells, there was increased activity in the ventromedial prefrontal cortex and the precuneus. These areas are linked with self-relevance and with the integration of autobiographical memories. Your brain was combining the sensory stimulus into the narrative of your life. What would occur, then, if the stimulus in question were not your grandmother's perfume but rather the TikTok algorithm playing to you grainy footage of a 1990s shopping mall that you had never entered? The identical circuits are activated. The identical reward is received. The same sense of self-relevance is formed. There is, however, a second aspect to this illusion, and it arises from the way in which cultures script memory itself. In 2004, Dorothy Bernsen and David Rubin issued a landmark paper in which they described what they referred to as cultural life scripts. These researchers asked the participants to imagine the 7 most important events in a typical person's life and to give their estimates as to when these events would take place. The findings were remarkable in that the participants mostly gave examples of positive events which are in keeping with cultural norms. These included graduation, marriage, having one's first child, and retirement. Even those who had never actually experienced retirement or marriage were able to state precisely when such events should take place in an ideal life. The scripts were passed on and had a structured form, being strongly biased towards youth and a positive outlook. Bernsen and Rubin claimed that these cultural life scripts serve as templates for autobiographical memory. When you are looking for certain events in your memory, you do not get an accurate record of them but rather events which are in accordance with the script. Anemoia functions in the same way, but in the opposite direction. If you look at media relating to the 1980s, the 1920s, or the 1990s, you won't be getting history but rather a cultural life script from that period. Things like neon lights, synthesizer music, and simple friendships are all part of the idealized sequence of events typical of an earlier time. Your brain picks up on this script, fills in the missing parts, and then forms a memory that seems important to you. You aren't missing a real place, you're missing a script. Here lies the element that turns this account into something modern rather than just academic. It was once just a private phenomenon, a single individual going through a photo album and experiencing a peculiar kind of discomfort. However, in 2014, Wildschut and his colleagues found that nostalgia also functions at the group level. They referred to this as collective nostalgia. Whenever you think about a nostalgic event that you have shared with your group, your evaluation of your in-group improves, and your desire to approach other members of it increases. Collective nostalgia thus brings societies together. Later, social psychologists Anouk Smeeks, Konstantin Sedikides, and Tim Wildschut demonstrated through longitudinal studies that collective nostalgia is caused by collective discontinuity. When people feel that their national or cultural identity is in danger, they look back to the past. They long for a common history which may never have existed exactly as they imagine it. Multiply this by the internet. Algorithms don't merely present the past, instead, they display an idealized version of it, one that has been optimized for engagement, and they show this to millions of people at the same time. Cottagecore, dark academia, and retro wave are all examples of packaged cultural life scripts, each coming with aesthetic rules, emotional highlights, and a ready-made feeling of loss. You are not experiencing a personal emotion, rather, you are experiencing a collective emotion which has been amplified by algorithms and prescribed by culture. Since millions of other people are feeling it as well, the illusion becomes more firmly established. It seems as though you have a genuine shared history and as though you actually have a home that you have been exiled from. Yet you had never been there. That is still the case. Why does it hurt? The pain occurs because your brain is precisely carrying out what Sedikides and Wildschut have shown is its strongest capability, using the past, whether real or imagined, to control your current situation. This pain isn't a failure, it is your mind trying to remedy a modern injury with a traditional remedy. The issue is that the drug is fake. Your brain has developed so as to place trust in things that are vivid, familiar, and emotionally coherent. It has not evolved to be able to tell the difference between a memory formed when you were 6 years old and one that was formed at the age of 26 through a YouTube algorithm. For your hippocampus, your striatum, and your ventromedial prefrontal cortex, a highly simulated past is just as functionally indistinguishable from a real one. Here's the counterintuitive fact: it is not the case that you are defective for missing a home which never actually contained you. You are merely encountering the negative side effect of one of evolution's most beautiful solutions. A memory system capable of planning for tomorrow is also capable of grieving over yesterday, even if yesterday was invented. Even when you have put your phone down, and the room has gone silent, you might still have that odd heaviness in your chest. The streetlights will still appear too warm, and the music will still sound too familiar. Now you have learned what is taking place. You are not recalling a lost golden age, instead, your brain is constructing one out of selected fragments, connecting it to your sense of self, and then rewarding you for the way in which you do this. The feeling of homesickness is genuine, but there is no actual home. Next time you come across that blurry video of a city you have never been to, made during a decade when you weren't even alive to witness it, you'll once again feel that pain. However, this time you will realize exactly what it is, not a memory pulling you back, but a story that your brain is telling itself, frame by frame, to make the present situation a bit more tolerable.